Hello and welcome. This is another screencast to support you in your work on the assignments for Research 1. And this particular screencast is going to be all about the demonstration of the selection and critique process that's used for assignment number 1. So we're going to get right at it, and actually as a part of this we're going to demonstrate this with some materials. Let me identify some resources that you need to be aware of and be thinking about using. And these are all going to be available on Moodle on the website. One is a brief 2-page Word document called Research Concepts Update. It simply lists and provides definitions for a couple of very basic research concepts. Not a complete document in this concept and sense, but it gives you a big head start. And then there are 2 research articles that are going to be examined as a part of this screencast. One is called To Work or Not to Work. The other is simply called Large-Scale Computerized Testing. They're both research studies that I completed and published, and they are also available on Moodle. So they are available resources. If I were doing it, I would recommend that you might stop right now, read at least one of those, and do a little review of the Research Concepts Update, and then return to the video, but that's your choice. As I said, this is a demonstration. I was going to use 2 actual research articles, and that I've just gone through this business. It's that you might want to do some preparation, but that's your call. Before you do anything, though, you need to look very quickly at the questions that are part of the assignment rubric. And you probably need to have that beside you as a reference guide when you're starting to do the reading process, because you're really looking for answers to specific questions when you're doing this thing. So read selectively, and you're doing it. That will probably help you out. I will tell you right now, before we go much further, that this is an intensive reading process. So this is not like reading light fiction before you go to bed at night. This is probably going to be intensive. When I do this process, I take a paper copy out, I take a pencil or a pen, I do a lot of scribbling, circling, listing in the margins. It's a hard work process for me. I would recommend the same for you. It's going to save you time in the long run if you spend a lot of time to start with. Let's start with teen employment. This is one of the 2 studies. This study was actually done about 10 years ago, actually closer to 13 years ago now. The study was done in conjunction with the support by the Wichita Area Chamber of Commerce. And so basically, let me just quickly look at some information that might help you as you're trying to address these topics on your rubric. Justification. Now, of course, I realize you're going to justify your articles in relation to the topic that you are going to present to me in the pre-assignment. But let's talk about the relationship for these articles. What would this article be a good justification for? Well, let me think of 2 possible sources. Suppose you were doing a study and you wanted to know about something like employment or factors that deal with the time and involvement of students. Teen employment was certainly a factor there. Certainly if there was a call in your community, as there was when I did this one, to simply find out, the question was simply, we don't have a clue what percentage and how many students as teenagers, high school students, are working in jobs in the Wichita, Sedgwick County area. How can we find out about that? So that was the basis for that. Let's also talk about a secondary source of justification. This is a study that is actually going to be the development of new data on a topic we didn't have information on before, and that leads to the second question on this: what type of report is it? This is definitely the development of new data. We're not doing a lot of sophisticated comparison. We're simply trying to identify what is the situation that exists in an area where we didn't really know much about it before we started the process. And I use the we here. It's not the royal we. I was working very closely in conjunction with some people in the Wichita Area Chamber of Commerce in doing the development of this study. They also paid for the resources to do it, so I'm always grateful to their debt. So 2 types of justification: a direct about the topic, indirect in terms of the type of research study that you're doing. Either one could be a basis for your addressing justification as you're looking at your articles. One of the big things I do in the study is I look for methodology clues. And so you need to look for information about subjects, who were the people involved, methods, how did we collect the information, treatment of data, how did we treat the data, and how about the reporting. So let's just briefly talk about that. The idea was we wanted to get first-hand information from people involved, so the desire was to get as many possible high school students involved in the study as we could. So a questionnaire was prepared that people could complete in a very short period of time. That was important because the schools were very generous in their time in allowing us to provide time for people to complete studies. And one of the reasons for this was we were able to show clearly this wasn't going to take very much time. We're pretty sure we got accurate information, particularly on the study parts, but there are huge numbers of subjects. About 17,000 students returned the first questionnaire. Treatment of data, pretty simplistically, we wanted to look at school, percentage of people who were working, percentage of people by grade level, and we wanted to report it out. Now, the reporting of this, I will tell you, this study had two uses. Number one, this was reported at an American Research Association meeting, and so it got some traction on a national level, but it was heavily reported and used by the Wichita Area Chamber of Commerce, both for school and non-school types. Does the study make sense? Well, you can be the judge of that, so you need to look at the topic that we started out with, the question that we ask, which you should be able to find very easily in the beginning part of the study. And simply the question is, did we seem to do, in your opinion, a good, valid job of trying to answer that information and report it in a way that makes sense? And what about your questions? Well, you always need to be questioning, and it's fair game for you to question the methodology, the purpose, the justification, anything about it, but it's also important to think about reflective questions. Such things as, what would happen if you were to do a similar study in your community, assuming you don't live in Wichita, or what would happen if we did a study like this in the Wichita area today, 13 years or so after the original study? And this slide kind of goes into a couple things, and I've prepared a couple of things that, very briefly, I might report back to you on the main features of this. One of the big issues, this is new data. No one in the community, one of the first questions, I should say it this way, no one knew much about the data here. I was asked about this in 1999 by an official of the Wichita Chamber of Commerce and wanted to know when was the most recent study we'd ever done of teen employment in the Wichita, Kansas area. I was not aware that it had ever been done. Turns out I was right. So this is new data. There had been studies done nationally, but never of this site. The next thing you should notice when you're looking at the copy is there are really two separate studies because we did a study in 2 succeeding years. Study 1 was a study of all 9th and through 12th graders in Wichita public, private schools. So it included City of Wichita schools, it included county schools, suburban schools, and some schools which would probably be a combination of suburban and rural. It also included 2 private high schools as a part of the process. 17,000 students did the first study. Second year went back and we said it's juniors only. Look carefully, there is a justification as to why the second study only did juniors and not all 4 grades. There's a reason for it, and you should be able to find it. Mentioned the idea we had large numbers of participants. Involvement was very simple. That was a big factor, so it didn't take much time, effort, involvement of participating agencies. Reporting was the most complicated feature, and you can see that if you look at the study, lots of charts and graphs and tables. So that would be a good area for criticism and simply find out, is there a better and simpler way to report that data? Retrospectively, if I were to do that today, we'd probably create a website or a streaming video and report a lot of it that way. But remember, 13 years ago, those things were not available. And then what questions should you ask? Well, I've put down the bottom, is teen employment still an issue that would be of interest? Remember, this was done when employment was high. We were in a high employment area. Now employment picture's changed a bit, so has it changed for teens in your community? When you go out to your community and you go to typically employers of teens in your community, and I might add in Wichita in 2000, fast food was a huge employer. There was a virtual army of teenagers working in fast foods. So simply ask the question, is that still the case today? Let's move on, because this should give you a couple ideas of what to look for, and go on and let's do a brief overview of large-scale computerized testing. And I don't think that's the slide I want, but let me go on and move on here, because okay, it is. So again, we can do the same thing with large-scale computerized testing. So again, look at the justification. Now again, this is a totally different type of study, and I'll report on this in a minute. So this is a lot different type of research study than I did in the first one. Again, it is a published study. And then one of the questions I kind of slopped over in the first one, but I'm going to focus on right now. What kind of report is it? Well, the three types are, is it an actual report of real first-time research? In other words, a report of an actual research study? Is it a summary of past research, or is it just a general discussion of research? I could argue pretty conventionally, and I think you'll find it, this is an actual report of a study that was done. So look at the methodology clues. Again, quite a bit difference in terms of how we do it. And again, address these questions, and you'll need to look at the study carefully to do that, because I want to come on and look very quickly at a couple of features about this. In the teen study, the big feature was huge numbers of students we surveyed. Totally different here. Sampling is a big part of this study. The reason is I did this in conjunction with some people at the Kansas State Department of Education. They had previously done a brief research review study in which they sent out questionnaires to lots of schools. Their impression was they didn't get very good data. So they wanted to try a totally different approach. So we purposely hand-selected very carefully according to criteria schools that could be surveyed. So very small number of schools that were on the list. Almost all of the schools on the list to be surveyed actually ended up participating in the survey. So you need to be looking at that carefully. Big question was, who's the person to ask about resources in the schools? We selected the school principal. When I reported this nationally, there was criticism about that. I would stand behind that, but you might ask, if I were to call one person in your building to ask about the availability and number of computers in your school, and that's basically the guts of this study, we're generalizing from there, who would be the person to answer that question? I thought I got pretty good information from principals. Okay, there's a lot of detailed appendix information. In other words, lots of stuff there. So when you read the study of this, don't think you're done when you simply look at the guts of the study. And then there's also judgment of looking at outcomes, because this looks at resources. And look at the two questions down below. You can ask yourself, what's the ratio of computers to students in your school, and how many students should be comparing computers in your school to make sure that you have what we call good coverage. And secondly, in your school district, how many households in your school area have reliable internet access? In my studies, I found major league differences in terms of the financial assets of the parents in the community about the idea of number one, having a computer in the school and the home, but more importantly, having a reliable internet access on the home. So that would be something to talk about. Again, this is a tool to help you with assignment number one.